My name is Mario Mairan. I'm a researcher at Universidad Complutense de Madrid. And in this module, I will try to introduce biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots are biogeographic regions with outstanding levels of biodiversity threatened by humans. The term biodiversity hotspot was coined in two articles published in 1988 and 1990, published by Mittermeier, Myers, and colleagues. They wrote that a region must meet two criteria to be qualified as a hotspot. The region has to have lost at least 70% of its primary vegetation, and it must contain at least 0.5% or 1,500 species of vascular plants as endemics. In this figure, you can see that there are 36 hotspots defined around the world, and these areas contain nearly 60% of the world's plant, bird, mammal, reptile, and amphibian species. For example, in the figure you can see that in Europe we have the Mediterranean hotspot. In fact, the entire Mediterranean basin has very high values of biodiversity. This is clearly reflected in the high number of Mediterranean endemic plants. 22,500 species of vascular plants inhabit the Mediterranean basin. This is more than 4 times the number found in the rest of Europe. And at the same time, these plant species are especially threatened. Well, the two criteria to meet the definition of biodiversity hotspot. At the same time, beyond biogeographic hotspots are phylogeographic hotspots. This term was coined by Medale and Diadema in a very famous paper published in 2009, and they defined 52 phylogeographic hotspots within the Mediterranean basin. The term phylogeographic hotspot referred to reservoirs of intraspecific genetic diversity. I'm talking about genetic diversity within each species. This biodiversity is usually not visible to the naked eye. However, this intraspecific genetic variation is very important to conserve, as it corresponds to the fundamental level of diversity that provides the basis for evolutionary change and is therefore crucial for maintaining the ability of species to adapt to new conditions. Let's see a practical example using the last remnants of subtropical forests remaining in Africa. You can see in this figure, I'm talking about the laurel forest in Macaronesia in Western Africa. I'm talking about the Canary Islands, Madeira, and the Afromontane forest in East Africa. These areas, both sides of Africa, are climatic refuges, and they are refuges for very ancient biodiversity, diversity that has remained here over time. It appeared the Sahara Desert and both sides of Africa have served as refugia. Then these areas still harbor the last remnants of a subtropical vegetation that has survived a long history of extinction. In other words, many of the species that were once wisely distributed now have found refuges here and have thus become what we call relict species. I'm talking about rare species with reduced distribution. But also, they can be called paleoendemisms. I'm talking about relic species that have suffered widespread extinction in their original rates. Therefore, because these forests provide refuge to a very old and at the same time very threatened biodiversity, we should consider them sanctuaries of biodiversity whose conservation should be a priority. In this example, we wanted to study the state of this forest, and for this study, we performed a study to address this, and we use a plant widespread in these subtropical regions. I'm talking about the genus Canarina, and specifically I will focus on the species Canarina canariensis that lives restricted to the Macaronesian forest on the Canary Islands. With this image, I try to illustrate the intraspecific diversity that we discovered within the species Canarina canariensis. Here you can see the genetic structure of this species in the Canary Islands. In colors, you can see the genetic clusters that we detected, and in summary, our results suggest a strong geographic structure with Tenerife as the central axis, separated an eastern lineage and a western lineage within Canarina canariensis. More in depth, the higher genetic diversity was found in the areas known as Paleo Islands of Tenerife. You can see here the Paleo Islands are three basaltic massifs of very ancient origin. They are located at the three extremes of Tenerife Island: Anaga, Teno, and Roque del Conde. These are the names of these Paleo Islands. Then our results show that these ancient Paleo Islands harbor high intraspecific biodiversity levels. Therefore, we can think that these areas have acted as refuges of genetic diversity. To interpret the role of the Paleo Islands, we first have to know a bit about the geological history of the Canary Islands. You can see this figure now. Here we see a representation that millions of years ago, we know that this was the appearance of the islands of Tenerife. It was formed by three proto-islands that correspond to the current Paleo Islands. But 3.5 million years ago, a great volcanic episode occurred, which gave rise to the volcanic edifice of Teide, and joined the Paleo Islands. The appearance of the Teide joined the three Paleo Islands, forming the present island of Tenerife. After the union of the Paleo Islands, numerous catastrophic events have continued to occur on the islands of Tenerife, such as giant landslides and intense volcanisms. These have repeatedly destroyed the island's ecosystems, with the exception of the Paleo Islands, which have remained geologically stable since the Pliocene, due to their position and structure. Therefore, the Paleo Islands have acted as refuge for life. This can be seen today with the high number of endemic species that are endemic only to these Paleo Islands. But we can see this also with the high interspecific genetic diversity levels that we detected within the Paleo Islands for widespread species with the studies that we performed. Therefore, we know that the Paleo Islands of Tenerife have been a refuge for biodiversity in the very long term. We can say that Paleo Islands are biogeographic and phylogeographic refuges for biodiversity. Definitely, this shows us that it is necessary to take into account the historical component when it comes to reserve design and management, and that a special effort should be made to conserve the biodiversity found here. Let's study biodiversity and phylogeographic refugia for diversity, and let's try to conserve them. Many thanks for listening.